kidding.
No. I'm sure it'll be clear. But I'm not saying this. Oh, is that better?
I'm going gambling again tonight
Me too. Me too.
because I was unfulfilled by last night.
Me too. I'll fulfill you the day, jeez. Me too.
I'm gonna start off slow though. I think I'm gonna do some video poker.
Is anyone not ready?
I'm not ready.
Okay. How do you think KU is going to do in the tournament?
They have a, I'm not happy about their Sweet 16 draw against Michigan.
I was.
Oh, sports.
3D.
Times like these, I feel like
I think they can do Michigan.
Michigan's good. Yeah,
There are 3 teams in our bracket that have been
Georgetown, Florida.
No, Florida, us, and Michigan have all been #1 this year.
But Georgetown's good too.
Georgetown's exceptional. The fact they haven't been #1, I don't want to take anything away from them. But Michigan should not be a 4 seed. That's absurd.
I agree.
Virginia Commonwealth.
We'll talk about college basketball later.
He probably doesn't know what sport you're talking about.
Congratulations to you all for making it this far.
You as well.
Observation 1 is the framework. These points is the interpretation. The affirmative gets access to 1 topical unconditional policy option, and negative gets access to 1 fiat unconditional policy option in status quo. Once again, the affirmative gets access to 1 topical unconditional policy affirmative, and the negative gets access to 1 fiat unconditional policy option in status quo. We say this is good for a couple of reasons. The first is going to be bloody ends are inevitable in a world of where you're jumping in our interpretation. Any critical framework would mean any critical argument mean the people die, and there's nothing the movement does to stop this. Number 2 is that there's infinitely a number of isms and representational critical authors that you could use to critique us out of this round. Number 3 is that conditionality is not reciprocal, specifically in parliamentary debate. The number 1 is that without bad side rebuttals, and using EMG strategy, I mean, that Kevin wouldn't have the ability to pinpoint exactly what your negative strategy was, which would completely skew his MG. But number 4 is this also leads to a time skew. The ace point in here is a time skew is different from strat skew because he has to focus on every argument, whether it be the status quo, the counterpoint criticism as a method of which you'd be trying to interrogate. Number 5 is this teaches bad responsibility because you could then kick out racist or sexist language, which would be a prior cursor for you to your policy option. Number 6, that reciprocity means that we can't kick back our affirmative plan. It means there will be no in-depth education and debate, but also reject this for fairness education in April, right? Because the gateway issue to the round, but also as explained in these standards. Plain text. The United States federal government should create tariffs removing incentives on soybean, soy oil, and soy meal within Brazil to reduce deforestation as a significant percentage of the Amazon rainforest. Once again, the United States federal government should create tariffs removing incentives on soybean, soy oil, and soy meal within Brazil to reduce deforestation of a significant percentage of the Amazon rainforest. Copy? Questions? First is going to be the background. The number 1 is deforestation decreasing right now, but it is still a massive problem. Thanks, Obama. The 8th point is legislation by Colombian and Brazil government is fighting for less deforestation, but farmers and loggers are still cutting the Amazon rainforest down. The 8th point is that money has never been working since 1999. This is funding millions of dollars to stop deforestation every day. 3 years of fluctuation of this rate actually occurs every 3 years. 6th point is that the main case of deforestation is soy yield. 60% of deforestation is a result of soy production, mainly in the United States and China. The 10th point, make sure that you get some of the soybean is a legume, which means it fixates on atmospheric nitrogen in the soil, which means it is not a fertilizer responsive as corn, which means it is a ravenous appetite for nitrogen. Because the soy plant has a substantial fraction of its metabolic energy to fix nitrogen, has less energy to produce seeds. This makes raising yields more difficult. So the advantage. First off, this ace point is that soy is killing the Amazon right now in status quo. Number 1, cross-apply the background, specifically subpoint C and D. The number 2 is that nearly 25% of all of the culture's fragile land is in Brazil. It's dedicated to soy, which means it has been increasing 5% from last year. The 3 is because soy is so low to yield. The United States has 9% tariff on soy products for farmers. They grow, which makes them grow more because it's economically sustainable. These points is salty. Number one is the plan makes it economically viable to grow soy, but by not taxing the shit out of soy means that the revenue is gained for the environmental stability. The point is that much like Monsanto seeds, GMOs increase high yield. This is the same ideology. And that number two is this raises for anti-deforestation projects, making Brazilian soy more competitive on a global market. Number three is the removing tariffs on essentially a bribe because they know they can go back to deforestation for soy production, which means they will ultimately get taxed. And of course, Brazil will say yes. The ace point is that they have lots of money to be made by the soy farms. Explaining the use points that removes tariffs for major foreign policy when it's working, which can seem as a win for Brazil politically. 6 point is the liberal leader. Their liberal leaders give specific coverage over stopping deforestation, something that Rousseff, the president of Brazil, would have the ability to work with and increase their platform. These points seen as win for small farmers because they get more wealthy and on the leftist movement because based off of weakening of small farms, these points this is forced to compromise because they don't want to look like hypocrites in dealing with tariff issues. These point. Deforestation in the Amazon leads to multiple extinction scenarios. The first one to be Amazon is critical for medicine. These points that 1/5 of the world's medicine comes from Amazon fungi bacteria. These points that they specifically and most recently the AIDS baby that was cured and also the Ebola breakout in Africa were used off the medicines that were discovered in the Amazon. 6 points cut in the Amazon makes the bacteria non-existent because these superbugs would go and check these points that we see ultimately we would see swine flu epidemic, but over 1 million times worse because there would no way be able to solve these points that because the spread would be in proximity, which means this would lead towards loss death. The explosive point is that even if antibiotics were found, they wouldn't have the ability to solve production quick enough because the CDC and WHO would have the ability to check back and create quarantine specifically within the region because they have been able to do it empirically, which means the G-point would ultimately check back for extinction for a couple of reasons. One, so the superbug would spread before quarantine would have the ability to check back. Also, the superbug explosion would kill millions on displays. And also, if you've seen the movie Contagion, you can see how they wouldn't be able to check back for this. Second is going to be Amazon key to the biodiversity. Ace point is that unknown species are in the Amazon rainforest right now. B point is that hummingbirds and honeybees are critical for pollination of plant life. C point is plant life, and the plant life eradication will ultimately lead to a collapse of agriculture because crops specifically within the Amazon rainforest phase. D point is that this would ultimately lead to depletion of resources in the area. Also China and the United States get a lot of their agriculture from specifically the Amazon rainforest basis. We say this would lead to extinction for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because plants are at the bottom of the food chain, meaning they would take away our ability to capitalize on the bottom of the food chain. We look towards rivers of the plain. We don't know which river must be taken out of the plain in order to make the plain collapse, much like the ecosystem. Our argument is that this would cause a collapse of the ecosystem, making extinction inevitable because the keystone nature of species. But also, this would decrease the oxygen in the world, which would lead towards massive amounts of natural disasters, which kill a lot of people as well. But furthermore, this would be uniquely bad because it was caused for a depletion of resources. We say this would also cause resource wars to happen, which would force Russia and China to go into the Arctic as well, challenging Russia's serious influence in the area. This would cause a nuclear war between these three nations, which ultimately calculating distinction because it would increase temperature levels so high, it would increase the pH levels of the ocean back, killing the biodiversity of the region as well.
Increase the pH of the ocean?
Decrease, my bad. It would increase the temperature, which would kill the pH levels.
The temperature kills the pH level? Where's the ocean for this? All right, the order is 1, 2, 3, 4, Kate, and then one more.
Do I need background or framework?
You will need the framework.
So 4, case in order, and one more.
Yep.
Thank you. Phil's,
Oh.
Sir, I'm good.
Always.
His memory is scary.
What people say.
Alright. A is the interpretation deforestation means clear cutting. The violation is that you do other things such as sustained forestry. The standards are forest on the ground. This means that you get access to tropical to untropical affirmatives and it protects from too many different policies that impotently explodes. The limits on your ground decrease the strength of our disc, maintain the competitiveness of our counterplants means that this removes negative flexibility, also negative competitiveness. Second is unpredictability. Because of the type of environmental destruction means that you get access to infinitely unpredictable advantages means that we are incapable of predicting your raft infinitely explodes from the ground, and access to ground means that there's no decrease the depth of clash means internally linked towards your arguments about why education is good. Okay, next. Framework first arguments and methodology comes first. Evaluate the political implications. For discussion strategy should be evaluated prior to the cost benefits analysis of the plan. This is best because theory shapes practice. Theory underpins and informs practice. And it is necessary to evaluate political representations, which are the ultimate form of political power links. First is managerialism, underestimating the environment in terms of how it can be appropriated through human science and to serve anthropocentrics and it creates managerial discourse which renders nature merely a standing reserve to be exploited whenever humanity sees it necessary more than the root of environmental destruction. Second is governmentality, specific objectivity, scientific objectivity, influence and policy, the decision-making which allows for the regulation of what forms of knowledge are valued, and permitted unrestricted state control, and primary decision is made in terms of populist demarcation, inside which can be protected through an unknowable outside. The third is securitization of their apologetic rhetoric. Depoliticizes the discussion, making it impossible to rationalize the context of their policy because it always is at risk of extinction, particularly in the context of the environment. This makes the decision-making and a policy failure inevitable because we assume the worst about the inevitable. All fourth argument is their methodology matters because it threatens to make more citizens and become more afraid of other countries and other countries' pollution. Then their own. This increases our attention, cutting all any possibility of globalized solutions that diverts attention from the internal cleanup methods. And nations are forced to invade others in order to prevent environmental destruction, which results in global war. The impacts versus the deterrence case because it justifies environmental protection via managerial discourse that perpetuates humanity's disregard for nature and duties to individual responsibility towards environmental policy, which makes the case impacts inevitable. Second is annihilation, securing the self versus the unknowable other means that we assume different and infinitely different, dangerous. We assume difference to be infinitely dangerous, justifying any response, no matter how violent, which is the critical internal link to extermination, because total destruction is only possible in framework that allows for an infinite increase in the ante, and assuming the worst of the other. The third argument is by the left, the destruction of self-interest in terms of perceived inferiority, and the other means that we are never satisfied with ourselves in the society. Society's logic of featherization turns us into shallow histers, unable to authentically engage in anything. The alternative: vote negative to embrace the specific intellectual and reject the biopolitical discourse of the YDC. Vote negative to reject to embrace the specific intellectual and to reject the biopolitical discourse of the YDC. Does anybody have any questions? It's conditional. So, first argument is the specific intellectual results generates resistance by uncovering how power is exerted over the individual. Focus on daily normalization and institutional focus fails because we don't see subconscious working of power and within power structures of domination. The institution is created through power relations, which is that there's no method to be critical of it. This is the reason why permutation fails. Next. The United States federal government should engage in binding consultation over creating tariffs, removing incentives on soybean, soy oil, and soy meal within Brazil with affected indigenous groups. Again, the United States federal government should engage in binding consultation over creating tariffs, removing incentives on soybean, soy oil, and soy meal within Brazil with affected indigenous groups. There's your copy. Do you have any questions? Solvency. First argument is that the natives suggest the terms love and protection of the Amazon because it gives more access to resources for life and culture. It also increased their increased for all projects of the YDC and the tribes engaged in consultation in 2012. The Bazasa and Corrientes and Tigre and Maranon tribes engaged in discussion with the Peruvian government over the project in the region, but there was no binding consultation, no gain of international recognition. Second is the perception of perceptual sovereignty for native violence. Currently, there's no policy pressuring new corporations to give governance to the protected indigenous population. The U.S. is consulting in the area with you bring in a new area of policy making that would increase the perception in the international media and would create a new standard for action. This creates a legal framework for costs in the future. This has a few implications. First is physical genocide, violence against indigenous populations, and the Amazon is ongoing genocide that gets worse with every single project that gets expanded. About 10 million natives lived in the Amazon for 5 centuries ago. However, there are less than 200,000 today, with Western colonists and corporations alone destroying 90 tribes. But since 1990 and land conflict, no international perception of indigenous populations now, which means that it allows corporations and governments to invade native lands and kill indigenous leaders and force people off their land. In 2011, 51 natives were killed in Brazil over land conflicts and land given to private corporations. Natives were displaced in this also, and when they didn't leave their land, they were forced off the land by corporations who were engaging in violent conflict to force them away. Third women. Cultural genocide, this is more than just an eradication of the practice, it is an eradication of the epistemological values and norms. Cultural eradication destroys ways of knowing, thinking, understanding, as specificity, it destroys survival and adaptive capability, creates cycle of poverty, because it destroys one culture in order to impose another system when population infinitely been disadvantaged by a capacity to reinvestigate dominant culture, cultural norms, which results in the cycle of poverty and material disparity. Next, unique, this first argument is the U.S. pharmaceutical industry is decreasing right now because of uncertainty over the sequester of Obamacare. It means the pharmaceutical companies are not investing in R&D because the costs are too high and status quo delay. Medical research is failing. 25% of Western pharmaceuticals are derived from rainforest ingredients, and currently 121 prescriptions prescription drugs come from plant resources first. Little B is that 1% of tropical plants are being tested right now. Projects are slowing because individuals don't want to work with U.S. corporations because it seems the U.S. as a source of predatory deforestation links. Arguments we increase cooperation in indigenous groups our table showing the United States how to change predatory deforestation, sees to increase cooperation with local individuals when, even if the agency know we saw cooperation, which outweighs the one they see. Also, second, is we increase pharmaceutical investment because local cooperation expedites research and testing projections for pharmaceutical industries, and they can engage in discussions of finding useful medicines and testing for plants and rainforests and turns your advantage on. Next. Framework. Yeah, case framework. First argument is that we get one conditional test of the one conditional policy test, and we get two conditional tests, one of the policy aspects and one of the theoretical justifications of the plan. This critical test. We get two conditional advocacies, a policy test and a theoretical test. The critical test of the epistemology, we should be able to test the outcome of the plan to prove your method good or bad. Our interpretation is not given any negative flexibility, which exploits out bias, and there's not our criticism is not a movement, and it's checking the theoretical justifications of your plan. You misunderstand how criticisms actually work. Also, you can still function within an FFS frameworks. Also, they're not infinite. Isms, this is checked by the strength of the links to the 1AC. Also, conditionality is reciprocity. You can kick your advantages or your app. I don't know why you think you're unable to do this. You don't have to advocate the entirety of your app. This is entirely reciprocal and no backside rebuttal gets checked by you beginning this conversation. The 1AC and the roll the negative is removing the affirmative bad idea. The unconditionality flips the burden, and you win on a decide the counterplan. Any times Q is absolutely inevitable. Some division suppressor or could be multiple T's or multiple dissets. The proof's inevitability Q is bad. Also, checking language is good. You could just make our language bad arguments, which means that this gets entirely checked. Also, conditionality is good. Also, representations case and the EFG check that discourse like racism and sexism. Also, we think the conditionality is good for a few reasons. First, that a hard debate is good bit. This is the entire point. Natural tournaments also multiple worlds is good because it creates flexibility for the negative. And there's the affirmative good safe prep time, especially when you get your topics 3 weeks ahead of time, means that there's an infinite explosion of affirmative ground. There's only risk. Negative flexibility is better for education, and more means that you have to defend every part of your policy. If you have 3 weeks to develop a policy, you should probably be able to defend it from multiple angles. Most real world's also best for education because you need to be able to defend your policy from the far left and the far right. Best for real world education, which is the applicability of how debate actually gets applied in real life, means real access better fairness in terms of distribution of ground, also in terms of access to education.
All right. The order is T. The app. In order, the framework stuff is on top. Then this is the K. Then the pharmaceuticals is that? Then critique, then consult.
Okay. T, the 1AC, the decide, critique, and then counterplay?
Yeah.
No. I'll just take the sheet.
Anybody else? Starting off Bob County, we need your interpretation. People are clear-cutting for soy the status quo. That's the thesis of our affirmative. Next is counter-interpretation. Deforestation is being the act of cutting down trees within the Amazon, act of cutting down trees within the and Fund B is the reason for one is clear cutting includes a lot of different. First is going to be ground one. Clear cutting includes a lot of different things. That includes clear cutting for things like within the soil as well as the trees, which means we are more specific on this issue. Also, we don't increase sustainable forestry in the world of your interpretation. We don't even access that word whether the results. Also, our interpretation is most critical. It focuses around the trees specifically. In your interpretation, just it says clear cutting. We don't know what clear cutting is. You just say we violate state forestry. You are not going through this interpretation. You say predictability, which turns on internally to education. No, more to this argument, but we say we increase the most predictable ground because it focuses on trees and then the act of cutting, not the clear cutting, which means your interpretation is more unpredictable. No, literature based on clear cutting next is if we went off to see if it's one or all the standards we will take.
What was the last one?
Reasonability.
If we went up until one standard.
All right. Conditioning. First off, you can see a whole host of arguments as to why trees is uniquely bad. One, these are not theoretical issues, but solve issues. One is that blood cancer are inevitable, which means ultimately there is you can never actually solve for all sorts of violence. You articulate on the criticism, and this probably be applicable to the counterpoint. Moreover, next you can see that there's an infinite number of isms, which means that it should be rejected on face. You can see this argument. You just give a bunch of reasons why reps are uniquely important for solving racism and conditionalities reciprocal and time space inevitable. This is not a response. We said the infinite number of isms means the app rep is never going to be able to solve this. It's unique problematic because you should not get access to the criticism and be rejected. Also, conditionality. Going since cross our interpretation is going to be better. We say one out of conditional policy option is uniquely good because MG skew, even if time skew is inevitable, we say strategy skew is also possible because we are not. You can see that we are teach math responsibility specifically. This is uniquely problematic because in the world your interpretation still allows for racism, sexism still exists, even if conditionality is still problematic. You can see even if conditionality is good for reciprocity, we can give the advantage not true. We can take advantages, but we cannot get the plan text. You can get the plan text, which means that is the reciprocity argument. You can see that we win specifically on that argument. You should vote on reciprocity. Also, you say it's heated times you because the baby's faster. That is probably reasons why it's uniquely bad. Partly because there are not backside wells, and you know that you are faster than I am, which means it's uniquely problematic. Also. You also say most worlds are going to be good because of infinite prep. That's not true. We have only 27 minutes of prep. You also get more prep because you say this is your prep room, which means you so have more prep than we actually do. Next is you say increase real world and real education. No more this argument. We say that you decrease responsibilities, which is uniquely problematic for racism and real world education because it's not how we learn about things. We can't just say I'm sorry and kick things. That's not how the real world works. You should reject it only for a priority for education. Eventually. Actually, go to the background. You can see a whole host of arguments that deforestation is decreasing the status quo. Specifically, this has a few implications. One is that there's no link to your managerial arguments. We have a risk that the managerialism does exist post-patch of the plan. It probably linked over. Moreover, this also means that deforestation decreases status quo. Which means there's no reason to actually consult the indigenous population because they're not wanting. You give no reasons on the counterplan that says that indigenous persons love deforestation is problematic. Go to a benchmark. You can see a whole host of arguments, sort of decreasing status quo. We consult to see it says we decrease deforestation projects. Link turns to your criticism. We say that environmental managerialism is uniquely problematic in the world of status quo, not in the world of planet. Even if we manage the environment, this is not specific to our argument. We say that managing the environment in the world of us is uniquely good because we stop deforestation. This is uniquely good for indigenous populations, but also is resilience saying yes, which means that we actually increase cohesiveness within the country to spill over into other deforestation arguments. That is coming off of solvency that we can decrease the amount of other managerialism that is happening because they have more money to increase this amount of funds impacts. Only go for resource wars. You can see this argument saying that we decrease the amount of pH levels, which leads to extinction within the ocean. That is problematic. Also, biodiversity, we can go for this too, which internally concerns your criticism that says that we focus on the environment, but we focus on the environment in a good way that says that we are viewing it as a place that could lead to extinction, but we solve that back. So we view the environment in a good way. Purposes.
What? Sorry?
First off, I already got your argument, question. Next is going to be pharmacy disad. We say the pharmacy increasing or increasing status quo. One is pharmaceutical companies have increased the amount of after sequester that led to companies questioning if Obamacare is still going to exist. That means that they're questioning. They're probably worried about decreasing funds to the status quo. That means that they will probably increase them because they're worried about. Next is you say they get a rainforest integration. That is not true. Actually, we turn. First off, we give money back to Brazil. You can see the whole host of arguments. They can increase the amount of research within the area as well as two. They have the ability to increase the amount of research development in other deforestation projects. Which means that other sorts of companies will get this more, even if it's not specific to the United States. Remove these terrorists looks as a win and increase the amount of money for the United States. You can see that of case means we can increase the amount of research development. Also, you say in our ways because of investment, we say that investments are relevant if we remove tariffs, which is good for both countries. Can't concede case to go for that dissent. Okay. You say methodologies first. We say they have to look at the impacts of a policy before you determine what methodology is uniquely bad. Next is managerialism. Managerialism is good because it creates a discourse that the environment is uniquely fragile, but we can say that environment, we say that it's good because it'll never lead to extinction, and that always criticism. Also, you say governmentality. We say this is good because this sort of biopolitics is uniquely important for checking back terrorism that might happen throughout the world in a world where alternative happens. That means a complete rejection for policy decrease because you reject the sort of biopower that is happening, a militancy that's happened within Brazil that is uniquely problematic, leads to decreased amount of foreign policy within the context of Brazil and foreign policy throughout the United States also. Permutation curve to both to the affirmative and vote affirmative to reject by political instance of the PNC. That literally means that we again battle solvency. If we win any sort of permutation, why biopower is good or managerialism is uniquely good. Solve that for extinction is the reason why we win. Solvency. Rejection is next to solve institutions is going to be key. You can see that blood cancers are inevitable. Moreover, the civil rights movement proved that you have to have a policy behind some sort of action to have any sort of action. So first off, it's interpretation that gets access to the functional technical competitors counterplan who access immediate insolvency and does not solve. The search for one is yes, no. Genuine choice one is it forces multiple worlds to maybe shoot the bad, but also real world. We act unilateral all the time, but also double line either. Relations are increasing status quo, or it's not unique with, or it's too low to solve, which means we never recover. Or also we say that they say no. One, so it forces people to move, and also two, indigenous people hate for deforestation because it's cultural worship. They culturally worship feedback.
I didn't need your intern on the theory on the
All right. The net gets access to a functional and textual competitive counterplan with access to immediate solvency that does not consult.
Okay. The order is going to be topicality. The conditionality framework debate that was on case. Advantage 1. Pharma disad. Counterplan. Critique. Everyone good? Is that a yes? First argument comes by the weekly lack of a topicality, no to generate all the reason those leader doesn't specifically articulate an RDI, I don't think it extend that in PMR. Next framework. First argument is under kind of interpretation in the negative is two conditional tests, so you can take two conditional tests, one AC, one methodological test, and one policy theory test. We articulate this uniquely good for a couple of reasons. The first argument allows us to gain best access to education because we get both critical education as well as policymaker education. This increases the breadth of the debate round and because it allows us to talk about issues that normally get the person aside, like issues of biopower, which we're linked to our critique means that this uniquely good reason to conditional advocacies. You say this is called the issue of dirty hands, and this is Neville. This is in Jordan World, which we read two arguments that both have structural violence and genital impact. In the case we're trying to solve this problem strategically throughout the debate round. In addition, we articulate it's not dirty hands. You have to justify the methodology that you use before you justify whether or not that is a good policy, often because the methodology underpins your policy. For our framework in the case, then this doesn't constitute dirty hands. It's simply a prerequisite and gateway test. You say that there's infinite types of isms that are traditional phase. This is just back to the fact we need a trauma to the criticism. In addition, different to reject distinction after the methodology of the 1AC. The methodology is inherent part of the 1AC, which indicates that if within the 1AC we have the ground to respond to it. The next thing is like saying that you have to reassert advantage or whatever. You say that our arguments are responsive. I heard cross-case arguments, which say, cross-case arguments say that this is not anything about economics and the lecture's bad. You say you look at access to the critique. This should be true. Organic cross-line framework from critique says the theory of practice means that this is uniquely to our education within the debate round. You say the interpretation is good because it's one unconditional policy. And this is dualistic directly to our offensive claim that says that you flip the burden of the negative team. In a world in which we get one unconditional advocacy, the role of the negative team, as articulated by the negative, is to prove that the plan is a bad idea. We can still do that and lose in a world of the 1AC because a dissent to the counter plan could outweigh a dissent to the case. We say that this is bad because it doesn't provide away because it doesn't allow us to test every part of the 1AC. In addition, this puts burdens on the negative team with the hard try has a decreased fairness. The debate is used to empty strategy skew. This isn't true. We articulate that there are multiple other ways in order for strategy skew to happen, to be multiple violations or multiple disadvantages. This means strategy skew is absolutely never in the world of the 1AC. In addition, you say that strategy skew because you have to answer multiple pieces of paper, multiple types of arguments, not unique reason, generating offense, and any of these things would mean that we wouldn't be able to kick at this. Would mean that we wouldn't be able to kick at this. Doesn't is capable of solving back. You say this allows race and sex across the empty critique. Every critique of different types of discourse is capable of solving back for this. So you're checking back because conditionality is uniquely key. No potential abuse as long as you're not willing to relate to this, but you don't allow them to vote for this. You said you're not able to kick the plan text. You said you're not able to kick the plan text, which means that it has to be reciprocal. First, are you crossing my above? That's not the role of the negative team. The advocates like unique side bias because you get to pick the specific policy, the specific subsidy that your people are doing, which means you get negative prep bias, which means you have to be able to check back on this by having multiple advocacies. In addition, you're articulating that multiple negative strategies are uniquely key to be able to check back against MG strategy, against MG shifting. You can read a new advantage within the MG, and because of the structured party debate, we get one chance to answer it and you get the PMR. This protects them because they get this having multiple conditional advocacies protects us from being able to do that, which is uniquely key to education and ground and depth within the debate. This is another term linked to depth of education because which is level of debate within the MG. Next, you see uniquely bad because not facts are rebuttals, that's my butt, starting this discussion within the PMC skill sign back this. You say 27 minutes of prep, you still get to decide what part of the debate happens. In case this is inside for you, in addition to the PMR, you say the responsibility for bad types of education. On cross-like arguing that cross-like from above, we're not bad education and conditionality is good, hard debate is good debate means that we should be able to have to test critical thinking. Also, be internal to education. This is the more real types of education. Policymakers usually have to spend again multiple different people who are capable of depending from multiple different types. This is the only way to stimulate real education, which is the internal funding to the activity, which means we're controlling the internal link to both fairness and education. Use fairness and education. Anything else you want, Katie?
You're good.
That paper goes away. Case? No. Yep. Your arguments about the deforestation are going to about resource wars aren't going to work in a world in which you can see the securitization term. You said that you increase the propensity of poor countries to go to war with each other because of securitizing logic. This means that you're capable of this means that the app directly causes stress in the environment and you're not able to solve it for any of your money. The arguments that managing the environment good within the 1AC doesn't address assessments or relates which say that management is bad for ulterior reasons. We'll get to that on the critique debate. Did that?
Sorry, can you make one argument on conditionality? What does the offense that
Oh.
you read on both positions?
Conditionality. If we lose the condition, if they win, the conditionality is bad. The only thing that you do is hold us to the offense that exists on all of these positions, not just vote against us on face. Don't reject the argument, not the team. Okay, back onto the disadvantage. No propensity for a link to our arguments based on the ability for natives to work with pharmaceutical companies in order to get access to plants technology that are already been tested by native populations. There's no unique way for you to increase business confidence and internal activity. You don't articulate internal activity. This is why we outweigh critique means we're someone to make the world critique framework outweighs this. Kind of fun. First of all, first is the counterplan is technically competitive. We take out the part of the plan that says to reduce deforestation and the significant part of the Amazon rainforest. This means interpretation. Next argument is reject the argument of the team. The ability to protect competition is able to defend your offense, which means that we have to enter this paper. In addition, it also reject the argument of the team. We're not going for it. In case there's no reround abuse within this round, and you say the force multiple world is bad. We articulate that functional competition is good because it allows us to test the action of the planned extensional competition. There's always going to be judgment intervention. Means there's no unique reasons for this. You don't give enough standards debate. Critique. Outcross framework. This is ontology comes first. This is the internal link to policy data. Because of the internal link to policy making, we can't understand what our policy actually has without understanding the ontology. Then they perpetuate because it's frames how we view the world happening in addition to having.
No.
Okay. In addition to how we believe political actions happening, this cross interpretation, they can get access to their impacts and prove the methodology flawed because it means that the true claims that they're perpetuating could also be flawed. You have to justify your methodology before you can justify your impact claims. Going for link debate. We're winning the materialism is bad. You say the materialism is good because the environment is fragile. This is exactly your argument. The idea that the environment is fragile, we have to be able to preserve it in order to preserve the entire humanity, which is as per your 1AC impact is the reason why the environment is good means that materialism creates the environment to stand and preserve, to simply use and disuse. The desire of humans. This creates an ontological framework this is always going to be a reason why you're good for the negative team and governmentality is good. And even if terrorism, in fact, we articulate something for the prophecy when we think the deliberate violence will cause them to be violent in the first place. This is the root cause of terrorism, or for this is the root cause of terrorism. No reason why you should prefer this. Next, permutation. You say permutation, do both permutations still, but still, the permutation still links to the preamps that Katie agreed. She says the institutional focus is bad because it does not allow us to understand the ways in which power structure board dark alternative is capable of doing this because understands how specific intellectuals interact with systems of power. Looking at institutions that the focus of power doesn't allow us to do this because we articulate our agency and change through those ways. In addition, doesn't allow for the type of critical thinking that we articulate to be uniquely key that exists to create agency that exists outside of the system. The next argument they can vote affirmative to reject power. First one, involved that they're making terms that the managerialism is good. They are always going to be linked to this critique and to the rhetoric. Corresponding the ontology argument that the ontology inherent part of what he sees. They should be able to get out of the creates a moving target versus voter for fairness and education. Next, you send people's on for extinction. I would cross apply. The last link argument. This method backfires because we fear other countries are going to destroy their resources, which destroys us. This means we have an incentive to go to war with other countries preemptively so that they protect their resources. This is the only way that escalation of resource wars happens as a result of the 1AC because we're controlling the internal links. The only impact we're going for. I articulate the alternative is capable of solving for this because it solves the mind and allows us to re-understand the relationship of power and to the world, which is capable of solving the use of the institutions are key parts of involvement because of the way the power functions. We ourselves create norms that are the focus of power.
So I am going to do the conditionality debate and then do criticism. I don't know how you guys flow the LOR. It's, like 4 minutes of overview, so. Okay.
So, Kondo.
Kondo, okay. Everybody ready? Seconds on a criticism is not enough time for you to allocate. You'll be able to win any risk of you winning you win an argument on the substantive level of this debate. I do not think that you have a lick of offense coming off of the substantive level of this debate, which means that the only risk that you're going to win in this elimination round is if you go for conditionality. Unfortunately, you are also getting waxed on that debate too. Conditionality. You are not winning the impact calculation level of this debate. Unfairness and threatening skew are absolutely inevitable. We could read several topicalities, several dissents. You not have an answer to. Some debaters are faster than others. In fact, you can see that the debaters in this round may be faster than you. But we say that we get a unique educational access by getting two different types of education, which is why our interpretation is best for this debate. It is necessary to get a holistic education from debate, which is why we should have critical debate as well as a policy debate. We say that we uniquely increase the breadth of education, which is preferable to fairness or the fairness claims that you're making because depth is access within the 3 weeks of topic research that you get with the NPTE topics. Look, you got the resolution 3 weeks ahead of the tournament, which means that you have already had access to the depth on the topic. It is now important for you to get the breadth. It is important for you to see what you missed in terms of the policy side and also in terms of the methodological justifications of your plan. You should be able to defend a policy that you spent 3 weeks crafting from both sides. We also say that we are the best for real world education because you need to defend yourself from the far right and the far left when you are a policymaker, which means that we simulate real world education best. This is a unique net benefit to our strategy and independently outweighs the fairness claims that you can be making because the point is debaters to become better policymakers, better governmental and educational decisions in terms of the actions that we make as policymakers. Even if we don't go to Congress, we will still be voters, which means that we need to be able to have this sort of access to education. You uniquely disenfranchise us from this. At worst, you will hold us to the offense on motions and paper, and this is more fair than just rejecting us. It is more fair to reject us to reject the ability to kick arguments than it is to reject us flat out as a team, especially in a one-down elimination bracket. Also, you would reject us on a single argument that they have not articulated as game point. Also, we think that this is a fair resolution because there is no offense on either sheet of paper. That indicates that there is a problem, not with our strategy. There's a problem with the way that the MG executed his speech, which means that he could have straight-turned the panel plan, he could have straight-turned the dissent. Unfortunately, it was his decision to make only defensive arguments on these sheets of paper, which means that this is an MG failure. Don't punish us for his wrongdoings. This is my senior year. I do not want that to happen. Criticism. Risk is a function of magnitude times probability, where probability is determined by the strength of solvency times the empirics. We are granted 100% risk of solvency because you concede the link to the counter, you concede the link to the criticism. You also concede the solvency on the alternative. An individual action is where norms are actualized. It is on the level of the daily. It is on the level. It is daily. Okay.
I want you to go down to the institution solve argument.
Yeah. Go down.
Cross applications for that.
Yeah, go down to institution solves arguments. There are going to be a few cross applications. First, don't let them extrapolate any words. This argument was incredibly blimpy. They literally said spend 30 seconds on this sheet of paper. Also, cross-applied Megan's framework analysis, which shows that ontology underpins how institutions works. This means how we can always change. We can always change getting at an ontological level, and our alternative is capable of solving at the individual level, but not at the institutional level, because institutions do not have a function. You be critical of them built within the system. Also, cross-applied Megan's analysis of the specific intellectualism. Your institutional arguments do not apply to the way that we as individuals relate to the system. This means that we are capable of accessing a couple impacts. First is the standing reserve. You justify infinite violence. Then it means that individual. This means that we can justify all violence against the environment. This short circuits and slows the short circuits a slow decline in biodiversity as per Vantage 1. Also, short circuits the slow decline in ocean pH. You do not have a time frame for your argument, but this is a systemic argument that is ongoing and empirically accurate, which means that we have the highest probability and the greatest magnitude because it justifies extinction, it justifies extermination. No value to life means no impact to death. All violence can be justified.
Give me an overview.
Just an overview.
Yeah. Then, briefly on conditionality, case and then criticism. Oregon didn't want to lose a conditionality so bad at this run that they undercovered there way too many offensive arguments command on the criticism. Even though Kevin only makes 30 seconds of arguments, even though Kevin only makes 30 seconds worth of arguments on the criticism, I think you're still winning arguments that be extended from the PMC. Talk about how our entire PMC is a link church to your criticism because we give you multiple reasons why environmental managerialism is bad, it's status quo, and the plan action is red. Check that back. That is a net benefit permutation that don't respond to the issues that overarching claims by the member of opposition speech are not good enough analysis in response to our board claims coming out of the AMG. On to conditionality real quick. The first argument we need is that our first argument on why your criticisms are bad is not an issue of why it should be rejected, but it solves the issue which means the bloody ends are inevitable. Even if you are saying that you're talking about structural violence, it's still an argument why the structural violence is still going to occur because you switch beta and don't actually do anything outside this round two. Actually challenge outside that type of structural debate, which means that you do not get access to solving everything. Furthermore, I think the permutation would have the ability to solve any residual link that you would make offensively as to why your movement would be best. On to case. You make a couple of claims talking about how we've conceded the securitization logic of the permits of PMC. However, you're not sponsors. Kevin's argument talking about how we are decreasing the securitization logic of the in order to plan because we give you reasons why deforestation is specifically a bad thing, which means that this is going to affect impacts in a couple of ways. Either one, extinction is always going to happen before we deconstruct the securitization logic of the PMC or of the status quo, or two, the permutation always at the risk to check back for any residual link, which means that the impacts of PMC are either going to happen before the word of the criticism or the permutations we would check back any type of securitization logic. On to the first advantage proper. First argument Kevin makes is that our plan works as massively in terms of criticism because we give you reasons why environmental management is bad and the status quo but not bad in the plan because we give you reasons why we actually stop deforestation. This is a good thing because we number one check back indigenous populations, make sure that they don't die. It's critical for their valuable life before they get access, which means they don't have access to valuable life in the world without the plan. Which means that extinction is always going to outweigh. We're also winning time frame arguments specifically about how right now if we don't do anything about the soy to fix the crop yield that's happening right now, deforestation is ultimately going to kill us all. Anything else, Kevin?
Yeah, they can see the argument. We give money to other deforestation projects because the money is saved for Brazil, which means they can stop managerialism in their own form of fashion when they have more money.
They also concede the argument that we give more money towards other projects including deforestation, which means that they can still give money and they can stop that type of mindset in a war plan. On to the criticism. Overview on the criticism. They say that Kevin is not going to be able to win this round of the EMG because he gets to it with 30 seconds left. First off, that's not true because we have arguments specifically on framework about how you have to look to the implications of the policy first, which means that whenever you look to the impacts of the plan, extinction is always going to outweigh. They say that the criticism solves for the thesis of the advantage. That's not true. That's a blip coming on DMO, not enough warrant analysis by way we don't get access. If we want a risk that our permutation actually increases the reason why managerialism would be a good thing, you are always going to be voting Texas Tech. Line by line. First, accept the Kevin's argument, say that you looked at the implications of policy first. You say that this is critical because we have to look at policy making before we look at ontology because that is the only way in which we evaluate ontological claims, which means that we are winning arguments by the PMC is always going to be a prior question towards your framework. You certainly assert that ontology comes first, but we have had a consistent story coming out of PMC giving reasons why that, which means that environmental managerialism is always going to be good because it's safe distinction, which means that we don't have time to stop to say the security rhetoric before securitization mindset before we do this. The only way to check the facts will be permutation. Also, they give a bunch of reasons about how there's no impact to terror. They say there's no impact to terrorism and there's no impact to our link term. Our response to this is that even if it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, there is no time frame on this. We call people terrorists all the time, which means there's no way to evaluate the impact of their argument on self-fulfilling prophecy. Permutation debate. Not going for the second permutation, extend across, reject the argument of the team, cross-apply from there. Arguments for the permutation you're going to be voting for is the first one that Kevin makes, where he says permutation do the affirmative and reject all the biopolitical assumptions of the PMCV. Give you a couple of net benefits. First one would be double sovereignty because we give you reasons why biopolitics is good with and our affirmative plan because we have the ability to control the environment and make sure extinction stops, which pray occurs too, solving back all your life claims, and also you drop reasons why we prove that your policy is good. It's very simple. Is that rejection of our mindset isn't going to be enough to solve the institutional mindset of it. Permutation is the only way to capture extinction. No way they can get that solved. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, all the dissents of the permanent extinction.
All the dissents of permanent extinction always does.